Good evening, students of Global Business Communication. This is the second half of the lecture for this week, week number 5. I don't want to get sidetracked today, so we'll get right into the topic. However, I just wanted to say there are only 8 students in this class, and I think it's a shame that we are not in the classroom, for this class in particular. Because I have a class with 66 students and I don't get to know very many people in that class. However, you actually are the smallest undergrad class I've ever had. It would be like a seminar. I remember when I was a senior and I took seminars and there was 10 or less students, and those some of the professors I'd already taken their classes, but that semester, because there were so few students in the class, it was just much more intimate and more, I guess, obviously personal, but I think it just made a much deeper impression on me, and the amount of time that you have to interact with the professor is just so much bigger than you would in a class where there's 100 students. You just don't get to talk to the professor at all in a class that big. And in a seminar, it feels like you're talking to the professor all the time. Maybe, depending on the student and how tired you are that day, maybe too much. I think we got to figure something out so that I think we're a small enough group that we can actually kind of have some sort of video call conference set up. That's not going to work for some of my other classes or any of them, but for you I think it would. So I'll keep you up to date on that. But for now, we're splitting, as I told you, we're splitting because my lectures for this class, this is a 3-credit class, it's a senior class. I should be teaching you more than the 2-credit classes, so I've split the lectures in half. So this is the part 2 of electronic communication. So let me get into it, and then we'll deal with the other possibilities later, and I'll probably upload a file. I already updated you earlier this week, so probably there won't be another update until later next week, but I will update you on what the plans are for doing things that are more interactive, especially with this class, okay? So the first part of the class I talked about formal stuff, and I talked about emails in particular. Some of the things I'm going to say to you today are based on they're based on a TED Talk that I watched years ago. I think it was originally the professor originally spoke in 2013, so it's 7 years ago, but it's I mean, when I saw it originally, I had already had the same sort of ideas, and I had already started talking about them in class to my conversation students. So I started to use that every year, especially in the upper level conversation classes. I started to use this guy's 10-minute TED speech. It's called I believe it's called Txting is Killing Language is the title, and then it's period and then JK and a few exclamation marks after it. It's a talk. It's 2013. That's right. The professor is John McWhorter, and he's a professor at Columbia College. He's an excellent speaker, better speaker than me. So I will link his talk to you so you can check it out as part of your, as part of the explanation for what I'm talking about today. You can sort of supplement what I'm talking about with his speech, because he's very succinct, and he's probably reading from teleprompter. I'm actually not, although it may look like I'm not looking in the right place because I forget to look straight in the lens, but I'm not reading anything. I'm just talking to you Sometimes I look down at my notes, but there's no script. I don't have enough money to buy a teleprompter, and I have no assistance. There's nobody behind the screen or anything. It's just me. So this my unscripted speech is more similar to what real speech is like. We're not having a conversation because it's me talking to my camera. However, you've probably noticed that over the last 5 weeks that I've started to be better at this. There's less pauses, and I know I have a tendency to say or just like many people do, and I also say the word like too much, and that's a bit of a leftover after effect from my high school days. I think every Canadian high schooler, I always, when I meet a Korean student and they say like all the time, I say, "Where did you go to high school?" And the student says, "Vancouver," or "Los Angeles," and I'm like, I'm like, I shouldn't have that. That's a word that gets inserted when you speak, and it doesn't really mean anything. It's not supposed to be there. It's kind of just a habit, or a marker of an indication that you're connecting things together, but it doesn't actually function the way it's not. You don't mean like. It's like means similar, or that you like something, that you enjoy it, or it's good. But that's not what the word like means when you say, "I was like going to school, and then I like came home and I saw like so many birds in the sky." There's 3 likes there that have no use at all. So I apologize for using the word like when unnecessary, but this is part of what I'm trying to communicate to you today, is that we're talking about electronic communication. And right now, I mean, this is a perfect topic. This was not my intention. When I wrote the syllabus, coronavirus had not completely turned our semester upside down. So this was already in the syllabus even before this happened. But now it has become very relevant because everybody's communicating electronically. Businessmen are, teachers are, students, government officers. People are not traveling by airplane. People usually prefer to, be physically in physical proximity to people because, I think that's human nature. There's sort of a, we're programmed to actually get physical, to use all our senses when we're communicating. So, visual senses is one thing, but I know human noses aren't very good, but smell and vision and hearing and body language and cues, there's a big difference between standing in front of somebody and talking to somebody on the phone. I'm one of those people who I don't like talking on the phone. It feels usually like some sort of burden to me. Like I have to stay on the phone and I have to do it. That's when I get on the phone, I try to communicate quickly and say, "Where are you? I'm here. Okay, I'll see you in 5 minutes." Hang up. That's it. Some people love talking on the phone. I would much rather sit across from somebody at a table, and then I'll talk. Most of my students already know I will talk forever. I can talk for 3 hours. But if you phone me, I will try to get through that conversation in as few seconds as possible. But if you get me at sitting down at a table across from you, or we're standing around and having a conversation outside, you probably have trouble getting me to stop. It's totally different. So the nature of electronic communication is also the same. There's different ways of doing it. The Texting is Killing Language TED Talk that John McWhorter delivers. It's the main point that he's making is that texting is not a degradation. It's not a bad form of language that's going to destroy English and make English less effective. it's just a different way of doing it. It's not going to replace necessarily. It's just another option. And the interesting thing about texting is, and I like it a lot. I always text. I don't like talking on the phone. Like I said, you can send a message, and it can be short and sweet, and you can communicate ideas quickly, but not in a formal way. You can just condense language into, it's almost like distilling it into something really concentrated. So you can use all these acronyms and stuff. One of the ones he uses is, right in the title, he says JK, which means just kidding. But there's so many of them. BTW means by the way, and FYI means for your information, and ASAP or ASAP means as soon as possible. These, we're used to these ones, but some of the more recent ones that, they weren't around when I grew up, but you're familiar with them because as I was growing up, they became popular because of the internet. For example, the number one American, at least Canadian, internet acronym is LOL. And we don't even say LOL anymore, we just say LOL. Now, that stands for laugh out loud. And I have no idea who actually started that trend, but it was to originally indicate that the person couldn't see you laughing, so you typed LOL to indicate that you were laughing. However, because it became such an incredibly popular, overused expression, it ceased to mean laughing, and it just became a marker of interest or accommodation or emotion in general. So it can mean actually the opposite of laughing. As John McWhorter explains, he gives you an example of a text back and forth, and one of the people in his sample, text conversation says. One person says, so what's up? LOL, so what's up? And then the person says, lol, I have to do a 10-page paper tonight. And he points out, that person's not amused. When you say, lol, I have to do something terrible, or not something terrible, but something difficult or painful or something you're not looking forward to. You don't have to, I have to do some homework all night. I have to stay up all night because I didn't start my essay. Lol. That's not actually laughing. You're actually looking for sympathy. You're just making an emotional connection with somebody. It has nothing to do with laughing at all. I'm not really good at using Korean stuff. I use them a little bit, but the k thing, that's usually actually laughing. I'm not an expert in Hangul at all, but you can also do the same sorts of things with Korean characters. It applies also. The yu, the crying eyes, Hangul symbols. I hope you guys know a little bit about Korean too. I'm not wasting my time. But that's my favorite one. My favorite Korean one is the crying eyes. The two Korean characters, the vowels that look like they're two crying eyes, like I use those all the time, and it doesn't mean I'm crying when I say them. I'm just saying, I'm having a hard time, or like someone didn't listen to me, or I can say, I can't find my car keys, crying eyes. It's like an emoji. So that you can get really creative with this kind of stuff. So texting has this flexibility about it that makes it unique. And this is why the first half of this class, I sort of emphasize to you the tilde, the tilde sign, the squiggles, tilde. That's the real name for it, by the way. The tilde is actually an accent. As far as I know, it's from Spanish, and it's a symbol that means when you put it on top of a consonant like an N, Señor, instead of it adds a different sound. Instead of señor, it's señor in Spanish. Don't ask me anything more about Spanish because I'm not fluent. But the accent is quite familiar. There's lots of words that are very famous especially in America because of the Spanish Mexican influence in the southern states. Señor, El Nino, those words have the tilde on it, but the tilde in Korea has become this kind of nice, casual way of being friendly. And it's almost like the lol thing in English, is where if you say, okay, see you tomorrow, tilde, tilde, squiggle, squiggle. That's what I was meaning when I said squiggles, if that was not clear. Tilde, tilde at the end, that means you're a friendly person in Korean. If you're using Kakao Talk or some sort of messenger, that means that you're being friendly. There's a time and a place for that, and the time and the place is texting. When it comes to writing letters and resumes and communicating official things, I don't think it's a good idea if you're a government officer, to write something like, okay, everyone, stay inside. Coronavirus is everywhere. Please don't go outside for 2 weeks and wear a mask. Tilde, tilde, LOL. That's not appropriate. So, one of the main points of this lecture and the part 1 lecture is you do have to be sensitive when you're communicating electronically, how things are received and what kind of impression you give. If you another thing is just things like sarcasm often don't translate very well. Like if you say, I hope you know what sarcasm means, but I'll explain it really quick. If you're being sarcastic, it means, for example, if I say, it's okay. I don't want to use something that's not appropriate. If somebody says, I don't know. Let's use an example like somebody's overweight. Okay, so I'm a little bit overweight, but some people are more so. So if somebody just said, if I was speaking to a friend of mine who was thinner than me, and then that person said to me, Jeremy, do I look fat? And I say, oh yes, James, you look so fat. And he's skinnier than me by 10 kilograms. Do I mean that he's really fat? No, I mean the opposite of it. I mean, shut up, you're slim and you're making me feel bad. And I can express that through my tone. But if you type that, it's not necessarily going to be caught by somebody. And that's a simple example. Probably not the best one. I should have prepared a better one. But that basically gets the point across, is that if you say the opposite of what you mean, you better be clear that that's what you are intending. Otherwise, you can end up with a really serious problem. So when it comes to texting, sarcasm, emojis, and these acronyms like LOL and these symbols, these characters and everything, that's part of what they're able to do. Those symbols are able to communicate. Like you can see the person's being sarcastic, perhaps, if they tag it with LOL at the end. It means I'm not being serious, right? Yeah, you're so fat, LOL. Then you don't have to have the emphasis in the tone. You can just kind of see that tag changes the meaning. So really, what texting can accomplish that writing formally can't, I already told you there's advantages to the seriousness and the exactness of preparing a really careful email or letter or message and sending it electronically. You want it to be perfect and you take your time. But if you want to be quick and you want to have almost instant communication by text, by words, by letters, not by speech, but by letters, you use texting. And it imitates speech more so than it does writing, like normal writing. If you do a presentation or you do a speech, essentially what you're doing is, like when Abraham Lincoln, writes a speech and then does the Gettysburg Address we talked about, or FDR speaks in front of Congress, or Winston Churchill, or Obama. Not Donald Trump, because he usually doesn't follow the script, but these famous speakers, John F. Kennedy, they have some amazing speeches, but they are speeches that are the built like writing. They write them down, and sometimes they have other people write them. Sometimes they take hours or days to make them sound great. They sound like somebody has written them very carefully. That's not what texting is like. Texting is like what I'm doing now when I talk about my friend asking me if he's really fat. It's me just making stuff up and just spitting it out. And in texting, you have to be careful too, because you just send a text and then you can't get it back once it's gone. And it's easier when you speak to say, oh, I didn't say that, or that's not what I meant. But after you text, it's harder to be like, no, that's not true. Because there's a record of it and people can take screenshots and everything. So don't take texting lightly, but really that's what texting is supposed to be. And I really don't think, if I was going to give my opinion to the Supreme Court or anybody else who would ever listen to me, they wouldn't. But it's really my opinion that texting shouldn't necessarily be taken as literally as something that's a written document. And that's sort of a Western cultural thing. If you write something down and you sign your name to it, you're accountable and responsible for it. And if you don't follow the contract, what you put your name to, then you should be punished. But texting is really like, should you be punished if you just say the wrong thing by accident? Or should you be able to apologize? I don't know the answer to that, but personally it's my opinion that texting should be taken less seriously than other types of writing, because it's not meant to be serious. Twitter is also that kind of thing. People react really strongly to tweets, and the president of the United States loves Twitter more than anyone I've ever seen. He sends out tweets like 10 a day. He's got thousands of them. There's a Twitter library with Donald Trump's, name on it. And should we take that seriously? Should we should that be the official, word of the president or not? Maybe in his case it should be. I'm not saying it should be or shouldn't be, but we need to make a choice maybe to say like, okay, Twitter is not an official channel, or Twitter is. We got to decide. And then it would make things clearer. If somebody sends a tweet at 3 o'clock in the morning after drinking, is that official policy, and should they go to jail for it, or should they be punished, or should they be investigated, or should it be like when they walk out the door and they yell on the street after going somewhere? Well, in some ways they should be held accountable, because maybe 10 million people are going to read what they write. There's arguments on both sides, but essentially texting is a very flexible medium that it allows us to do a lot of things with words that we were not able to do. And it does follow sort of a natural inclination, or a natural, programming that we have. Human beings learned to write, a few thousand years ago. We learned how to speak like 150,000 years ago. So which are we better at? Naturally, everybody's different. I'm not saying that. Some people don't speak very well, and their writing is just amazing. There's lots of people like that. But in general, I think our genetics and our culture and things are sort of lean in that direction naturally. And and to be an amazing writer doesn't come as naturally as interacting with somebody by speaking. Just take a look at any kid who's 5 years old. My children are 2.5 and 5, and both of them will just talk all day and never be quiet and ask a million questions. And then you get them to sit down and write one letter, and it's just the most painful thing. As you get older, you might choose writing as a more, something more preferable for any number of reasons, but you can see it as kids grow up. Like, not very many kids are like, I don't want to talk, I want to write. I actually have never met a kid that said that, who's 5 years old. So that's what I'm talking about. It just comes more naturally to speak. So when you text, you're actually doing something in the sense it's more natural than sitting down at your computer and trying to organize your thoughts and write an essay, for me, or for fun. You probably never do that, but for a professor or for a class, you have to write an essay, or for your boss, it's not because you want to do it or because it's fun or it's natural. It's because there's a certain purpose. Right. So this is how different. I'm going to read you this. One of my favorite poems of all time. If I can find them, there's William Blake, 226. I know this is a business communication class, but this really illustrates my point. And also, this is a beautiful poem. So, yeah, it's time to read you a poem. So, listen carefully. This poem is called The Tyger. It was written by William Blake at the end of the 18th century. If I can find it, there it is. Poetry is probably the most extreme example of a type of writing that has a lot of rules and it's very formal, and it takes, unless you're just not just a regular genius, but a special type of genius where you can put an amazing poem together in a few minutes. But most people who write really good poems labor and erase and work on their poetry for hours and hours and days, and the ideas come and go out of their head, and they finally put something together, and maybe they might not even be satisfied with it when it's finally published. But poetry is something that most people in our generation, or your generation, the millennial generation, that anybody who's born in the digital age, poetry is not that attractive. But you all love songs, and songs also take a similar amount of effort. Right? It's just a little bit more entertaining, again, because you don't have to read it and you don't have to write it. You do have to, the person has to write it, but when you receive the song, the poem, and the person sings it to you, it's a lot more interesting. So here we go. William Blake, The Tyger. Tyger, Tyger, burning bright in the forest of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? In what distant deeps or skies burnt the fire of thine eyes? On what wings dare he aspire? What the hand dare seize the fire? And what shoulder and what art could twist the sinews of thy heart? And when thy heart began to beat, what dread hand and what dread feet? What the hammer, what the chain? In what furnace was thy brain? What the anvil, what dead grasp dare its deadly terrors clasp? When the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears, did he smile his work to see? Did he who made the lamb make thee? Tyger, Tyger, burning bright in the forest of the night, what immortal hand or eye dare frame thy fearful symmetry? I told that because some of you are Korean, and Koreans love tigers. And I won't talk about the interpretation of that, but that's the type of, I don't know how many days or hours or years that that idea was bouncing around in Blake's head. But that's not a text message. That is poetry. And if you text in poetic verse, then it's nice to meet you, and we should talk more, because that's an amazing ability. Okay? I think you take the meaning. What texting represents is a flexible medium to get close to people. As a person who's studying Asian business, that's what you need to focus on. The separation of these two lectures was by design. The first one formal, this one casual. So just be aware. I've explained in some detail the principles of the basic differences of the two mediums. They're both electronic, but they have their advantages and different disadvantages. And please check out the link. I'll put it on the website. John McWhorter does a fantastic job of explaining. He's a linguist. I don't think I mentioned that. He's an excellent professor. He's a good speaker, and he's a TED presenter. And his specialty is linguistics, and that is not my specialty. So he can fill in the gaps for you. Okay, that is it for this week. And if you have any questions, as usual, send me an email. If anybody else is listening or watching, feel free to comment or contact me. The website is koreanheroes.net. Thank you for listening. Good night.